So I'm absolutely delighted now to be joined by this morning's keynote speaker, Dan Pink, who's a best-selling author, of course, and brought out a new book to sell is Human. Dan, welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's always good to be at ICMA.
So you brought out the book to sell is Human. From reading it, I figure that you're saying we're all salespeople now.
We are, whether we like it or not. A big portion of what we do on the job is persuading, influencing, convincing, cajoling, something that is very much like sales, and it's absolutely true in overwhelming proportions for people who are managing towns, managing cities, managing counties.
The scary thing is, from the research that you did in your book, you said that we actually spend most of our time selling.
Well, we spend a lot of our time, more than I think that we realize, and I think that's especially true for the folks in the roles who are here. You know, they don't have enormous amounts of formal influence and formal power, so they have to use their powers of influence and persuasion and, let's call it, selling.
I think another thing that you say in the book, which is obviously true as well, is we feel a bit uncomfortable about this being called salespeople. So are we now kind of extras from Glengarry Glen Ross?
We do feel very deeply uncomfortable with selling for a whole variety of reasons. And one of the things that I'm going to try to explain here is that a lot of our discomfort comes from a certain set of conditions in which people have always sold, which is a set of conditions where the seller always had more information than the buyer. When the seller has more information than the buyer, the seller can rip you off. That's why sales has a sleazy reputation. But we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world where buyers and sellers are more evenly matched on information. And what that means is that the way you sell, whether you're selling an automobile, whether you're selling a new policy for your town, whether you're selling an idea, whether you're selling yourself, changes in some very significant ways. And the great part is that the social science gives us some very interesting clues about how to do that more effectively.
Because you talk about, I mean, obviously the old ABC, always be closing.
From Glengarry Glen Ross.
That's it. And you have a new ABC.
Attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. A, attunement, B, buoyancy, C, clarity. Those are really the foundational qualities that are necessary to be effective in this world where we're all selling, but the landscape has changed. So attunement is perspective taking, buoyancy is how do you stay afloat in an ocean of rejection, and clarity is how do you move from accessing information to curating information.
So what advice would you have for the folks here? Because as you say, they're city and county managers. They would never have dreamt of being called salespeople. So how do they go about attuning to this new world that we live in?
Well, I think there are a bunch of, what I'm going to talk about here is some really practical, tactical tips and things. I think one of the most important things is to recognize that a lot of the skills that are necessary here are really fundamentally human skills. How do you understand something from someone else's perspective? And there's some interesting techniques that you can use to focus on people's interests, to understand more carefully what they're saying, to listen a little bit better. How do you stay resilient and buoyant? How do you frame choices in ways that allow people to understand what's really going on? How do you make it easy for people to act? So there are a lot of really, really good evidence-based practical things that people can do in response to what for some is this not particularly happy news.
Well, Dan, thanks ever so much for that. It's a really good read.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.